No, I am very much, once I find one photographer, I will work with them forever kind of person.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician
What's up, my friends? Welcome to the DIY Musician Podcast. My name's Chris Robley, and speaking of friends, I have two friend-related things to tell you today. One is that when you run a podcast for 15 years, your listeners kind of become your friends. And some of you are actually even my friends in real life. And because of that, I want to tell you something big about my own life and about the life of this podcast. But you will have to wait till the end of the episode for that announcement. The other thing that's friend-related is that's the topic of this conversation today. I'm going to bring my friend Cristina on here, and we have a quick list to go through of the 8 people you should consider befriending in your life, in your musical journey. Because even though this podcast is the DIY Musician Podcast, the do-it-yourself musician podcast, we don't really mean for you to take that super literally all the time. There are many aspects of your music making where you're going to need a collaborator, a sounding board, an expert, someone to help carry the load. So you will benefit by having these 8 people in your life. And if they are actually true friendships and not just working relationships, well, all the better. So let me bring my friend Cristina on here to talk through this list. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
I'm good. You might be able to see, I've got my electric guitar pedals out for the first time in a very long time for a gig this weekend.
Oh, a gig. I was wondering what that was. It looked like a table nest.
It is a rat's nest. I've kind of forgotten not how to play electric guitar. It's been a really long time since I have, because as you know, I've been in like folk fiddle camp world and playing acoustic guitar forever. So, but it's nice to like shred again.
I've never been good at shredding. I consider myself like a semi-decent rhythm guitarist in that I can get on stage and I can play, and I have played electric, but I've never really invested in shredding. And now more than ever, I want to shred.
Invest in the shred.
Invest in shred. I've been watching like videos, and it's probably no secret that I'm a huge St. Vincent fan at this point, but I was watching a video of her performing, and she's just a freaking shredder.
She's awesome. And then she also has those incredibly ugly guitar tones that are so amazing.
Yeah, really dirty.
I love it.
I think that there's two things happening. And I think on one hand, we are sort of embracing folk again, coming out of the backlash of like super hyper electronic produced music. Mm-hmm. It's cool to see like a grassroots movement happening. But then I also think that the other end of it is that we are all embracing edge again, which is fun. And I'm excited to see how edgy stuff gets.
Well, I noticed you're looking for some musicians.
I am. So
in LA, you're never going to find anyone in LA.
If you're in the Los Angeles area and you play groovy bass and an eclectic sound of drums, please hit me up. I need a band. It's been too long. I have an incredible band in Portland, Oregon, but I want to play gigs in LA, and I hate playing by myself on stage. I've done it. I'm capable. We all are, but I don't want to. So
you just created the podcast version of a Craigslist ad.
Yeah, because I don't know if people use Craigslist. I actually think that this is a huge hole in the industry, is that we don't have like a wildly popular and successful place to ask for musicians.
What did we used to call those when they were in the newspaper? It had classifieds?
Classifieds.
Yeah. Well, speaking of finding people, this episode is all about finding the 8 friends that we really need to have in our life as musicians. And you came up with the topic for this episode. Then we made a list. I feel like it was because we were trying to sort of ponder the definition of DIY and like when do it yourself should be taken literally and when it should be more like
do it communally.
Yeah.
And also there's that old adage that by the time you're 30, you need to have a friend that's a doctor and a friend that's a lawyer. And I think there's another one that I'm forgetting. So that's where that came from for me too, is what is that as a musician?
Clearly DIY, I mean, it's in the name of this podcast, has a lot of merits to truly do it yourself, and you get better at something, and those skills, even when you eventually may outsource those tasks, like you know more about how to do it, so you can work with that person better, you can hold them more accountable. It just makes for you running your career in a more informed way if you've managed that stuff yourself. Obviously, saving on budget by doing things yourself is kind of a necessity, particularly early on. But there's always like walls we run into as well.
On a personal level, as an artist, have definitely hit a lot of walls myself by trying to literally do everything myself. And it also became an ego thing and a point of pride that I felt like I needed to learn how to do everything. So at a certain point, I thought, well, I not only have to be a musician, I also have to be a recording engineer. And I also have to learn how to mix. And I also have to learn how to master, or et cetera, et cetera. I also have to learn how to edit video, and I also have to learn how to be my own marketing director. And I also have to, and so it can get exhausting. It can get really overwhelming. And though we here, you and me and Kevin, spent years trying to help people learn how to do it all themselves, definitely encourage to outsource as much as you can, because there's no need to do a bunch of things half well. I'm not a good mixing engineer at all. In fact, my mixing work is absolute dog shit. And I know that about myself now. Do I know how to do the basics? Sure. Do I know how to master? Absolutely not. I know how to add a plugin, and I'm married to a mixing and mastering engineer, so outsourced. So
You really took that one to its fullest.
I figured out the best way to do it myself was to marry someone who is going to hear this and is going to roll their eyes.
Well, let's get into it then. So you kind of mentioned one person. Who was the first person you should befriend in your musical journey?
I think a recording artist or recording engineer. To be
There you go.
Engineer, producer, mixer, all those people. Again, don't think that you should be doing that yourself unless that is your craft. Unless you've spent a long time really honing that in. Somebody else has spent more time doing it likely and can do it better.
Yeah.
So that's, for me, number one. That's not number one on our list, but we're going to skip 5 and go to that one.
No, I think it's good because I think there are things on our list that are both about creating a product. And I would say this type of person is in that camp, product, art. And some of these people are more like, emotional cushion, confidant types of things. But anyways, what I was going to say is the way in which they are a friend or a collaborator or someone you hire, those lines can get blurred, but you can pay them for the job they're doing. If they're amenable to giving you the friend rate, sometimes that happens. Sometimes you'll find collaborators who will work for free if there's co-ownership in the project. So I think when we put friend in quotes, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is like a buddy you see every week and they work for you for free. That's not what we're trying to say, but just someone you can lean on in a number of ways. And then for me, when it comes to music production and mixing and stuff, I've worked with friends in many capacities. Some who will engineer, mix, sometimes produce the entire record. Sometimes I record myself and then I send the tracks to someone to mix. Sometimes actually it's more like, okay, I've recorded these tracks and I do want to mix this myself, but I just need someone to listen and say, hey, it's too boomy.
Yeah.
Move the mic, more of a, what do you call it? Like a coach or something.
I've also learned that you learn a lot more. You learn tools along the way while working with these other people who do things differently than you. So I approach songwriting, for example, very differently than maybe somebody who's an engineer producer who approaches it in a different way. Or one thing that I learned, making a record is that you don't have to do all the fun stuff up front. You have to just record the basics and then spend the last bit of time then adding on all the magic. I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't work with somebody else, because my method of working is throw everything at the wall, get overwhelmed that I don't have everything I need, but I have too much of things I don't, and then try to figure out where it fits, So working with somebody else, you can maybe learn different tools or learn different practices that then enhance how you do it the next time. So that's one thing that I definitely appreciate from working with a separate mixing, mastering person. One thing I want to say, though, my caveat is I don't buy into, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this because we have partnerships, but I don't buy into the AI mastering BS. I really think that you need to have a person. But that's my hot take, not endorsed by CD Baby.
Well, one thing we hadn't planned to discuss, but I'm wondering if we should add to each of these is like, how do you find these people, these friends, these collaborators? I guess let's start with the mixing producer type person.
I've had people come up to me at shows with business cards, and I didn't always take them at face value, but I had one engineer, it was 2000, it was a long time ago, came up to me after a show and he said, "Hey, if you want, I'll record your next album and I'll do it for free." And
Wow.
I think he thought it was going to be a really basic folk record. And then I decided to completely change my sound and go into the indie electronic world and spent a year and a half recording this record
And
for
he hated you
free. Oh
every
my
minute.
god, by the end of it, he freaking hated me. But so that's a story in not wasting somebody's kindness. But that's how I met the first, engineer that I ever worked with. So I think performing or community, asking people, "Hey, where did you record?" Those sorts of things.
Yeah, that for me was, I mean, playing gigs was one. You just kind of meet people throughout the years, and I've worked with some people that way. Um, my friend Adam Seltzer, I
Oh, I know
reached
Adam.
out. Oh, cool! I reached out to him because before I knew him, because he had recorded some Decemberist albums,
Mhm.
and I liked how they sounded. I was like, oh, I'm going for that kind of vibe. So, I kind of like did like a little tryout at his house. I was so nervous and like my hands are sweaty. And anyways, I played a couple songs. He's like, cool. Well, I'll record with. I'll engineer this
He's
record. So
like
we
a
did.
huge, huge engineer, by the way.
He's awesome. And then like, a few years later, I was in his band and we went on tour. It was
So
awesome.
cool.
But that just came about by I'm saying all these details partially to brag because it felt like a nice friendship to have at the time. But also all it was I just reached out to someone who made the music I already liked. So
Mhm.
it's totally possible for you to do that as well.
It's also wild, I mean, not to stay on one type of person too long, but, especially with engineers, producers, mixing, mastering, all that is a craft that takes a long time to really fully understand the mechanics of. It is engineering, literally, and so I do believe that there are less of them than there are musicians, songwriters, performers.
Mhm.
So, the fact that you just named one engineer and I've worked with him too, it does sort of go to show
He
that
isn't the one who recorded your album for free, is he?
no, no, oh,
Okay.
no, I could not afford Adam. But I believe I worked at the Type Foundry
Yeah, that
on
was
a record like 10 years ago with him. Anyway, that is such a small pool that it is a small community, and reputation goes a long way. So not only does word of mouth is that a way to get to know like these people, but also how you act. It goes back to what we said a few podcasts ago, to make sure that you always leave a good impression because it's a small pool. People
Mhm.
talk, engineers talk, and you don't want to be that artist.
Yeah, it was the nightmare to work with.
Hmm.
Well, the second person you wanna befriend in your life is a visual expert. This could be like a designer, a graphic designer, or maybe a a video editor, someone who
Hmm.
can do cool things with visuals. And in my life, I've met how do I say this? It's like similar to the home recording thing, like, I really do like designing stuff myself, but if it's for an important project for me, I always need, like, extra help because I'm not a pro at it. So, even if I put together mock-ups or whatever, I usually hand it off, and then sometimes you just run out of time and you're like, "Oh, crap, I need a poster for that show," and
Hmm.
it's always nice to have, yeah, a network of people to help in that department.
Yeah, definitely. I have a few, and again, word of mouth, asking around, putting up Instagram solicitations. Hey, who can do this? That's a
Mhm.
great way to meet people too. So definitely helpful. I think it's one of those things too that we all once again think, well, I can just handle this on my own, and then we're not happy with the end result because we're not visual editors by nature. So yeah,
And you'll spend way more time getting B plus work than they will getting A plus work, so
dude, I just tried to make a Canva trailer for a music video, and it took me, an hour just to make a trailer that was just a matter of cutting and adding text, and I
Mhm.
know that there are people out there that could get that done in 5 minutes. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious on this one, like, in terms of meeting people, like, design work I know can be outsourced or not outsourced, it can be how do I say? It's, like, very digital, like, you could work
Mhm.
with a designer in wherever. But there's some part of me that wonders if a local sensibility is still helpful in some way when it comes to design. I'm just thinking like in terms of the aesthetic of like show posters you might see at a venue that all have a consistency. How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I first of all think a variety, it's helpful to have something stand out. So if you know that your local designer recognizes what the local aesthetic is and can work not only within it, but work with that to build something that stands out within it, that could be really cool. I also just always believe local is best because your community is going to support one another. If you have a designer that's local and you do really great work with them, and then your bandmate also has a side project and they end up hiring that designer, and you're just feeding your community and you're feeding your pool. And I think that that's the best thing to do, is to build community with each person that not only is your friend, but is your collaborator.
Yeah. Well, in that aspect of the business is definitely not my expertise. So I might not be correct in this assumption, but I do kind of think people who do design for musicians know it's not like super lucrative. So I wonder if
Right.
it has that more local feel because they're just simply passionate about the music scene. And so they end up doing kind of work for money, but often just as like a passion project for
Yeah,
local
definitely.
musicians.
The other one too that we were talking about was photographers and videographers. That I think that goes in the same pool though, as far as reach local, because again, it's like putting on a show with a local band versus a touring band. You want to make sure that you're supporting your local community. Unless, of course, it's like a really cool photographer from some other city that you've seen online. I mean, it is such a the visual medium is, we have entire apps based around it. So maybe it's not as important locally. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I don't know about local so much as I feel like in my own personal experience, I've had better luck with photos when it's someone who I kind of know. Like I've found it more
Mhm.
stressful to work with like, oh, that's the photographer and they're going to frame the shot amazingly and there's going to be a set and costumes and all, and like then I'm like, oh god, I'm stressed and now I look stiff and whatever, as opposed to just like give your friend the camera and do something. Like I don't know if
Yeah.
that feels, because I know you like the kind of the drama of the set and all that. So maybe
Oh, I love it.
you're probably the opposite of me then.
No, I am very much, once I find one photographer, I will work with them forever, kind of person, because I have a lot of fun in that setting, building, like you said, building the set, building the idea. Definitely like to collaborate with my photographer to come up with concept and to build that world together. And it's very rare that you can find a really good photographer who's willing to also give you some creative control. But yes, I have had the same photographer for the last 5 releases, and
Oh
then
wow.
prior to that, I had the same photographer for the previous 3 releases. I really like consistency, in my visual world building. But I also really like having fun with them and saying, okay, we tried this for the last 4 releases. What if we went somewhere completely different? How do we make that happen? But also add a little bit of cohesion. And they're willing to go along with the thread with you because they're your friend and because they trust you, because you guys have built this trust together.
And are they the same person that helps you make your videos or is two totally separate?
That's 2 separate people, but same world. So
Okay.
the same person, I've had the same videographer for everything that I've put out. Um, the thing is, though, is that this videographer Tiki is now getting so big that I feel I feel like, oh, I don't want to just like ask for you to do this on a homie rate now, and I
Uh-huh.
can't afford your actual rate.
Oh,
So there is a point where
your friends graduate?
your friends graduate, and you have to also, if you love them and they're your friends, just let them do new things unless they
Yeah.
want to do it for cheap.
Well, a fourth person we really need in our life is the no person. Who's the no
Amen.
person?
Anyone that's willing to not be a yes person. And I've seen way too many yes people in the industry, especially the bigger you get and the more yes people you get, which sounds counteractive because you're getting bigger. There needs to be a little more critiquing at that level. But I've seen it happen way too many times where the bigger you get, the more you have people being like, oh yeah, brilliant idea. Let's do that. I really like having people in my life that keep me grounded and say, you know what, this is a good song, but I don't think it's your next single, or
Mhm.
this is a interesting idea. Let's try to evolve it or something.
For me, this is my wife, which
Mhm.
stings a lot, to be
Yeah.
honest. It's like, I want her to love everything and think I'm a genius, and then she'll just be like, that song bugs me." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, it doesn't sound like you. It's weird, it's pretentious." Like, she'll tell me, like, what the critiques are.
And I find that to be way more supportive.
Yeah, because
That is support.
it is support, particularly because when she likes a song, I fully believe her, and I'm, like,
Mhm.
extra proud because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, I know you're not bullshitting me. You actually this particular album of mine, you listen to, you love it." Like, it it feels very real. Because 'cause she'll just be brutal when she doesn't like it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
Well, not
same.
brutal, just
Same
honest.
on my end. It's like it's very obvious when they don't like it. And similarly, I'm just gonna say this, I think that we also have to learn how to just, let go of when we have taken the big swings, and maybe we're reading into how much is everyone liking it. They're saying that they like it, but I don't think they like it. We have to sort of let that go a little bit. I'm saying that as somebody who recently experienced that, where I'm like, I don't know that people do like my new song.
Oh, just
And you
like
just
like, where it feels a little, like, radio silency somehow, or
mhm. It
um,
happens.
I wonder if there's something to be learned from our, discussion with James where he's like, "I actually remove myself from" I forget how he phrased it. It was like, "I just move forward.
Mhm.
I don't get attached
Yeah.
to results or to,
I
like."
think yeah, that's a very holistic way of looking at it, of being like, I'm gonna drop this and what happens, happens. I'm gonna do as much work as I can to make sure that it reaches the audience, but I'm not gonna be too upset either way. And I think that that's healthy in everything in
Mhm,
life. But having people to keep you checked and to keep you grounded and to let you know what is, a calculated risk worth taking sometimes is
mhm.
more supportive than having people that are like, you're brilliant, I love everything you do." Um, at least that's what I think.
Well, and if you can combine the no person with some of these other people we've already mentioned who are, creative collaborators in a
Mhm.
way, obviously you're enlisting them because you want them to support your vision, but you're also hiring them for their expertise. And so
Right.
if your producer says that part doesn't work, it's really dissonant, you think it's dissonant in a cool way, but it's actually just really grating and it's going to prevent people from whatever. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, I'll have to really consider that. And also, the more they say no out of a genuine place of their expertise, they're
Yes.
not saying yes so they waste your time and money, because a producer or an engineer might just say yes to everything because you're paying them.
On the other end of the spectrum, I just heard an anecdote of a pop star that I cannot name for legal reasons, being in a room with the executives and showing them all of their demos for their new album, and the executives just saying, "Nah, we hate all of this." And from that end, those no's seem a little more capitalistic. They're basically saying, "These aren't gonna chart." And the artist is saying, "But I made these from my heart, these are
Mhm,
my songs that I'm very proud of." So, making sure that those people that you're surrounding with also have your best interest in mind, because those people that are saying no aren't necessarily saying no because they have this artist's best interest in mind?
right, yeah, that makes sense. The next person on our list is the person who can serve as your marketing sounding board. So this could be like, a coach or a mentor or something. It could be someone you're paying to do marketing work, or it could just be like your friend who's really good at TikTok and you feel awkward and you're not all that active on TikTok, but you want to be. So you're like, what the hell do I do? What should I learn? Who should I follow? And like get their input. But just someone who is tapped into the marketing world at large, or even the music marketing world. So you can run ideas past them.
You're this person for me.
Oh,
I feel like whenever I'm not sure what direction to take something, or if I need help with copy, or I could use some ideas or some fresh takes, you're that person for me. So
oh,
thanks.
that's good. Have I ever been your no person? I can't remember. I don't think so.
Mm,
I like all your. I think I like all your ideas.
No, but we've worked collaboratively for so long that I'm sure there were times where you gave me a fresher take than the one that I am sure you're a little more of a gentle no person, and that you know how to give that feedback by the balance formula of I really like this, but what if we did this?
What is it? The shit sandwich?
Yeah.
Compliment, critique, compliment.
But yeah, I think like I could really use a friend who's good at TikTok. I have them. I just never reach out to them because I'm afraid of TikTok.
Yeah.
But
Well, that was just one example. I mean, it could be anything. If it's like I need to make a email welcome stream and I've never done that, who could help me? You know, there's got to be
Mhm.
someone in your life, whether they're good at writing or they're good at email automation. You know, there's a lot of skills you need in the marketing world, but you can piece them together through some friendships.
I've talked about this before, but one of my favorite things to do back in the day and still now is before an album comes out or a big piece of music to do a listening party
Hmm.
and sort of inviting each one of these people. And the marketing person is a great person to bring, or the writer is a great person to bring to say, how do I market this? What are the words that I should be using to describe this? Because they may be able to pick up on something that you are not even recognizing. So let's say your record is really electronic and it's really flowy, and you really thought it was like this edgy thing. They might be able to say, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the balance there, and that could be an interesting thing. So making sure that you are again diversifying the community of people that you bring in your art, that can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd sort of forgotten about that. It's one of the most useful things they can do, whether they're good at assessing your branding, your visuals, your marketing, copy, whatever, is just do they think you're achieving what you're setting out to do? Like there have been so
Mhm.
many times where I'm like, ooh, this song is just like, yeah, look like really edgy and badass. And then like I'll read a review of it and they'll be like, yeah, it sounds like a really good John Mayer song. And I'm like, what? I thought this was like, I don't know, something angsty.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little too relevant for me right now. Definitely have had that experience where I thought, "Oh, this is so dancey," and then find out it's a really soft tune, slow tune to
It's
a
like
lot of people.
an AM gold downer.
Yeah.
That's funny. When you mentioned the listening party, it reminded me of one of our other friend types we want to have, which is kind of like what I was calling the digital street team. But I don't
Mhm.
mean this necessarily in that they need to be an online fan base that goes and does a bunch of work for you. I just mean some friends or some super fans where you can basically, before you put something out that's big, like maybe a new music video or a new album or something, you can just say, hey, I'm about to announce this thing in 20 minutes or whatever, or in a minute. Would you all mind just whatever, checking it out early? And if you're going to like it, please like it so that you're like priming the pump or whatever. That's a
Mhm.
terrible term for it. But you know, like getting cringe, getting early engagement, and you can lean on them because they're most likely going to be the people who will like and comment anyways. You're just sort of nudging them.
Totally. Yeah, you and I were talking about this earlier. I've never really reached out to people in that way and asked for them to do that, but there are definitely friends that naturally do that, and once again, I think that comes from community-based support. So, not to say that we're all looking out for ourselves, but sometimes if you support somebody else, they'll support you. So, I think that that's a lesson that I've learned over the years is that, if I have a friend who has a music video that comes out and I share it, then maybe when my music video comes out, they'll share it. But then there are also those friends who just love you and support you and are the first to do it, whether you ask them or you don't. And those are amazing people to have around because they do make you feel good. They also genuinely usually are very excited. I have one friend in particular who texts me after every new release to tell me, "Oh my gosh, this one's my new favorite." And I get excited for those texts. In fact, I just got that text and I was like, "Thank God I got this today. I needed this
I
today."
needed
you
this.
know? And I said, "You know what? I was really excited to get your text. Thank you so much for sending that to me." So those people exist. And sometimes it does take asking, "Hey, do you mind checking this out?" Just in letting me know if it's gonna land or whatnot, or sharing it if you like it. There's no shame in that.
Yeah, it's one of those things I had to get over to do because
Yeah.
I was very reluctant to actually ask for things directly. But I think the more it became obvious that social is so distracting for our brains and that people literally don't see everything. And even if they do see it, they might not give it as much attention as I would want them to. Like in that environment, I think it was okay to say, hey, you're like my closest people that I really want to ask this favor of. So it doesn't feel like totally like an imposition, I guess.
I'm really bad at that also because I end up sending like the song to my friends in text message, the MP3
Oh, yeah.
the week before because I can't wait. I'm just like, here, listen to this new song I'm putting
And then
out.
when it comes out, they're like, yeah, I heard it. You sent it to
Yeah,
me. I'm not going to do anything.
Exactly. So that happens to me a lot where I'll be so excited about something and, I wonder if my friends think I'm the most self-centered person in their life.
You're a musician, isn't
Saying that out loud, I'm
obvious?
realizing how self-centered that is.
And also, the title of this episode is about friends you need to have, but it's really all about what these friends can do for us.
Yeah, I think that's a huge disclaimer here. Just because they're your friends doesn't mean they're just your friends for this reason. It's just saying, hey, if you happen to have this friend, be good to them.
Yeah.
Oh, it does sound really transactional, yeah.
Well, we're discussing one side of the ledger in this episode and just make sure you're not a selfish asshole and do things for them when they need it.
Were you ever part of an actual street team?
No. Like,
I was.
Really? For who? Will you admit it? Was it Limp Bizkit?
No, Chris, don't shade me about Limp Bizkit. I hated. Okay, funny anecdote before I go back to street team. A couple years ago, Justin, my partner, is a troll to me sometimes, and it was my birthday, and we were driving somewhere, and he just played Limp Bizkit on repeat, on my birthday. Started playing Limp Bizkit on repeat, and at first I was like, "Oh, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to listen to it." And by the end of it, I was like, "Okay, well, the production is really good."
This is a jam right here.
It was a jam. This is the same thing happened to me with Steely Dan, and now I'm a total Dan head. Anyways, I was a street teamer in high school for my crush's band.
For like a local band.
Yeah, local band, and it was solely because I had a crush on them, and they would hand me posters and tickets, and they would say, "Go paper the town with these posters, and can you go sell some tickets?" And it's very embarrassing that I'm admitting this out loud. I hope if you're out there, you know who you are.
That's amazing. All right. Well, moving from crushes and street teams to the next person you should have in your life is the biz person. The person who it has legal knowledge, has copyright knowledge, maybe someone who knows distribution.
I have this friend, and unfortunately, I get asked for recommendations on music rights lawyers all the time, and I always refer them to this friend. And I feel bad for that friend now because
is it a friend that I know as well?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I feel bad because I know that they're worth way more than artists are willing to pay them. So I feel like they do a lot of homie deals. But it is helpful to have those conversations. I mean, lawyers are expensive, and this person genuinely cares about artists. So I think that they're willing to give some free advice from time to time.
Yeah, and there is like quite a wide array of sort of music business things to know, I guess.
So much. Publishing confuses the heck out of me. Copyrights, forget about it. Yeah. I don't copyright my music. What else?
I mean, even like local music business infrastructure, people who run music unions or I don't know, like booking agencies. It's just the list could be endless, but radio and playlist promoters, all these things. And this is not to say you actually need all these people, but when you need someone to point you in the right direction, it helps to have someone who kind of has their eye on a lot of aspects of the music business.
Yeah. I even have reached out to this one friend when it was a situation where I had to sign a contract. So the contract was hey, this is contract work. You're going to be working on this artist's record for this label, and they're going to pay you X amount, and then you won't own anything. And I was just a little concerned because labels are known to F people over. And so I sent it over to them and said, hey, if you have a spare 5 minutes, can you give me some legal counsel on this? And again, it's not fair to ask people that that's what they do for a living to do those things for free. So, keep that in your back pocket when you're asking for favors.
It's like meetups are usually pretty helpful though. If they allow you to ask a really good targeted question for and get 5 minutes of someone's time, that might be all you need.
Yeah. And I think at our events as well, we offer a lot of one-on-one mentoring, specifically with people in these aspects of the industry that can offer a 15-minute counsel. And I think that that's really useful. At least that's what I've heard from our artists. So if you ever come to a DIY musician event, let us know what it is that you're looking for, and we'll try to fill that void.
Yeah. All right. Well, the last person on this list, in some way, it might be the most important and most obvious. It's just to have friends that are artists.
I know.
Whether they're in a band or they're a solo performer, whatever. It's like something so necessary about just talking about this stuff with someone who gets it.
Totally. I have a friend who's an artist who is, married to a non-artist. And sometimes I will talk as artists and I'll recognize, oh, maybe this is something you need to get off your chest with an artist, not with a non-artist. Or just, if your whole community, you live somewhere where that isn't super prevalent, know that there are people online that can become your friends, or there's us, like we're here to talk. Having people to bounce these things off of, because it is a completely different career path or passion path than anything else, in that you need people that understand the ups and the downs, because there are ups and downs. The mental health aspect of being a musician is tough.
Yeah.
So,
and I would also say, to clarify or to be very specific, I think they need to be musicians. So we use artist in quotes. Someone might think, oh, well, I hang out with a writer or a painter or a poet or dancer. That's cool.
yeah.
But they don't quite get it in the same way, because music is just so distinctly its own mode of expression. So for instance, my wife is a writer. So in some ways she gets the creative output thing, but she really doesn't get the part of it that requires you to go pack up your car and take an hour to drive somewhere and play this thing. And it might be super rewarding, or it might be a shitty gig and you get paid. Like the trade-offs and incentives of music are so strange and unique to music that she can't get it, even though she gets what it's like to be a creator.
Yeah, I think one thing that can be really challenging about this path is that it isn't linear at all. You could be playing for 15 years, packing up your van and going on the road and doing the thing and putting in the work. And you can have moments where you feel like a total rock star and you're playing to 5,000 people and you think, all right, I made it to the mountaintop. And then the next day you're playing to an empty coffee shop and nobody cares. And, so that's not, or nobody buys your record or whatever. It's not a super linear path. And that can be really challenging. It can be really depressing. It can cause a lot of anxiety or a lot of paralyzation of creativity. And so to have somebody in your life that you can talk to, once again, you are this person for me, someone that can understand and recognize that this is really more about the love than it is about the end result, especially in 2023.
It has to be. Yeah, because when you're talking about all the bad aspects, it's depressing, it's disappointing, you've got no money,
so hard.
All these things, a person who doesn't understand would add all those up and be like, you're insane.
Why are you doing this?
You actively choose to do this thing that's making your life worse and worse. And what?
Yeah.
And it's because they don't get it.
You just spent like $1,000 on something that maybe 100 people will listen to. That's insane.
or $20,000
or 20. I mean, it's insane. And we do it because we love it. And yeah, you need friends to help you through it.
To help us justify our delusions.
And help them through it.
Yeah.
Because that's almost more rewarding sometimes, is connecting with somebody else about where they're at on their journey.
Yeah.
And being like, yeah, I totally get it. I've been there right there with you.
I feel that too much.
Too much.
Yes. Well, there's our list.
So you are this person for me in every way.
Every way.
Maybe
Wow.
not. Well, you're not.
I've never engineered any of your
You've
albums.
never mastered anything
No.
for me, or you're not my photographer, but you are all the other things and more. And I think you have been for a lot of people.
I think I have. And thank you for being that for me in many ways. And I think this is leading me to say something, to give an announcement.
You got to make an announcement now.
I got to make an announcement, which is that this is my final episode of the DIY Musician Podcast. Okay, I'm cutting to a different segment here just because Cristina and I weren't quite sure if this was going to be the last episode that I was on. And sort of as we were recording it, we were like, it's about friendships. Let's just make this my farewell. So I'm going to cut in and say the goodbye that I wasn't quite prepared to say when we were doing it live. And then I'll cut back to our conversation for the very end. But yes, this is my last episode of the DIY Musician Podcast. After 18 years at CD Baby and after 15 years on this podcast, I am moving on to the next chapter in my career in the music industry. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But before I talk about where I am headed, I just want to say a few things about where I've been. 18 years ago this month, in August of 2005, I walked into CD Baby to do what was definitely the strangest, most absurd interview in my life, and probably one of the strangest ones that had happened at CD Baby. I had come from a job at a bank, was wearing like a button-up shirt and tie, and I walk into this place that is like Willy Wonka's odd warehouse. Everyone was dressed like an anarchist, and I go to this interview. I sit down with 3 people, and I'm pretty sure in hindsight that Jamie Schvotkin and John Stoip, who were VPs at CD Baby at the time, and Derek, who founded the company, I'm pretty sure they had already made the decision to hire me. So this was just like a formality, or not. What's the opposite of a formality? An absurdity. This was just an absurdity for show, but I didn't know that at the time. I was nervous, came in, and they say, we have 2 questions for you. One, can you play Smoke on the Water? And I'm like, yeah, I could play Smoke on the Water. And they said, over in the corner there, that's Derek's guitar. And if any of you have ever seen pictures of Derek Sivers from the 90s where he's holding his guitar, it was that one. I forget if it was blue or purple or something. It had stickers all over it. Anyways, I go over, I pick up that guitar. Anyways, I played through the riff, and then they say, okay, second question. Do you think you will love working here? And I said, yes, I will. And I absolutely did. Working at CD Baby, working even is a weird word to use. It's been like my entire adult life, and I've loved it so much. It's been so integral to who I am as a person that being at CD Baby, being a part of CD Baby for that long has been an incredible ride. It's been amazing to witness so many revolutions in the music industry. When I came into CD Baby, it was essentially a credit card processing solution for musicians. What that enabled them to do is have a storefront and an e-commerce business online, where prior to that, basically all the on-ramps to customers and to listeners were controlled mostly by the majors and some very powerful indie labels at the time. And so this company kind of blew open the doors for niche musicians, emerging musicians, unknown musicians even, to become businesses. They could become entrepreneurs and establish a thriving business or cottage industry around their music. And it was a very beautiful thing. We also then introduced what was sort of a prototype of the Square Reader, only it was the analog version. It was those old carbon copy credit card slips that you would like crank on this old machine. We did that for musicians. Then we became the first independent distributor to send independent music to iTunes, and the whole download explosion. A few years later, that turned into streaming. We helped introduce music publishing as a concept to independent artists and really explained one of the most complicated aspects of the music business, helped educate millions of artists around the world in that. Then came YouTube Content ID and social video monetization, and on and on. And it's been an incredible ride to be at the forefront of so many of those changes. But having said all that, the most profound experience of my professional life has been listening to and talking to and being in dialogue with this community, the community of listeners on the DIY Musician podcast, the readers of the DIY Musician blog, and all of the many thousands of people who have come over the years to our DIY Musician conferences. That is the thing I'm absolutely proudest of about this job. And you, the listener, the reader, the attendee, you were what made that a success and were the reason I woke up and was happy to go to work. So I want to say thank you. What I also want to say is I felt incredibly, I hate to use the word blessed, but I feel very blessed. Not least of which is because I got to work at this company that was founded on a handful of principles. I forget actually how many there were. I think there were 5 principles that Derek wrote down when he started CD Baby, and they were like the 5 northern lights of this thing. And I don't remember them all verbatim, but the one that stuck with me the most is that we will not censor anyone based on our assessment of quality. So not to say we couldn't censor someone if they were a jackass or, saying something awful. We could do that, but that we were not going to be a gatekeeper. We were not going to be a gatekeeper or a tastemaker who made assessments about what was worthy to reach listeners. And I think that was such a beautiful idea to start a company around, because up until then, almost every pathway to find a listener and to make a sale was based on some other entity, some person, some company believing in you and validating you enough to kind of intermediate the relationship between you, the artist, and your potential fans. And with CD Baby, that intermediation went away. You were suddenly given direct access to the marketplace. And, that doesn't mean that everything that came through our doors was amazing music. We were simply saying, we're not the arbiters of this. We are going to let the music meet the marketplace. And not only that, but the market itself is not the best decider of what quality even is, because some of my favorite songwriters are fairly unknown. There's a guy named Bill Morrissey. He's an absolute New England folk legend. But the very first time I went on Spotify to listen to his music, I'd loved it for a long time on CD, but I went to Spotify and I was like, oh my God, he only has 900 monthly listeners. I think he has more since, but this was a few years ago. And I'm like, how does this guy have 900 monthly listeners? That's ridiculous. And it's because merit, quality, etc., aren't always reflected in the numbers. And so even to the degree that the marketplace can shape what is worth listening to, even that's a sort of failed or flawed equation. And CD Baby was built on the belief that not everything is for everyone. Not only is that okay, but that is beautiful. These small communities can form around music. And I absolutely love, and have been so deeply just changed by the fact that Derek was wise enough to remove himself and ourselves as a company from the position of tastemaker. And that idea is what drew us to the company and also planted the seed in our heads to create the DIY Musician podcast, because we realized there was so much to learn from musicians that most of the world had never heard of. People who were making livings going on this new thing called YouTube, or selling sheet music to instrumental piano music that really only had an audience in these sort of late night new age radio shows. Like stuff that most of the industry is not paying attention to, didn't give a shit about. But there was a diehard audience willing to pay and willing to support the ongoing creativity of these artists. And we were like, there's a lot to learn from this. There's a lot to learn from these people. And so I also just want to say thank you to everyone over the years who has contributed to that sort of community wisdom. This podcast was never about interviewing the most famous or the most successful people by the world's metrics. It was about scalable wisdom. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's been on it, everyone who's called in, hundreds and hundreds of listener call-ins and emails. This was definitely a community achievement. To the degree that I was a shepherd of it, I guess I also feel like I was a witness to it. So thank you for that. Now for what's next for me. I have taken a position at BandLab. If you're not familiar with BandLab, it's an amazing app that allows people all over the world to record music from their phone. You can now create music anywhere, collaborate with people all over the world instantly. I'm really excited to head over there. I'm going to be doing something very similar to what I've done at CD Baby, but I think that'll be good because in one way I'll have one foot in the familiar, which would be content creation, podcasting, blogging, all that sort of stuff. And then one foot in new territory, which, won't be entirely new to me personally, but is stuff that we haven't necessarily covered on this podcast. So more in the collaboration, recording, production, creativity side of it. Generally at CD Baby, it's marketing or distributing music you have already finished. And this will give me a chance to kind of concentrate on the other half of that whole music equation. So I'm really excited about that. And if you paid close attention to Kevin Bruner's farewell episode, you may remember that BandLab is where he went. So we're getting the band back together. Really excited about that. I hope you'll follow us over there and follow me just on Instagram. It's at Chris Robley, Robley. Keep in touch that way. I hope you say, hey, please DM me with, what's up in your life and what's up in your music making. I'm always happy to hear from you. Well, it's kind of tough to wrap up 18 years in a 5-minute segment or however long this has been. So I'm going to take us back to the conversation Cristina and I were having, and you can hear us say an awkward goodbye together. Hoping you and the crew continue this effort in an amazing way.
Well, it's with a heavy heart that you say that. But I also know that no matter where you go, you're going to be shining a light on artists everywhere. So I'm so grateful for what you've built, what you and Kevin built here. And yeah, it's really tough to see you go. You're my friend and my collaborator, and you've been a cheerleader for artists with this podcast for 15 years. I'm really, really, really going to miss you, truly. I don't know what I'm going to do without you.
Oh, well, I will miss you a lot, and I hope we see each other, particularly at Folk Alliance, so we can keep going and recording.
We're definitely gonna keep seeing each other, Chris.
I know. We got to finish our 70s covers album.
We do. But I think that I speak for everybody in the DIY musician community when I say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's been listening for 6 months or 6 years or 15 years.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I guess that tears it.
Ta-ta.
Ta-ta for now.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Until next time.
Peace.
You've been listening to the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, broadcasting from Portland, Oregon, USA.